Hi everyone, Sajid Amit here, and I just wanted to take you guys through my impressions of this rather unsung yet amazing IM called the FLIPEARS AURORA XXIV. Okay, so by the time this video is released, there is a possibility that I might have released, or I will have released, a shootout between the Aurora and the Fat Freak Grand Maestro, because they're both kind of bassy IMs. And I have a number 3 in there, and that is the Craft Ears Omnium, which is another gem that's flying under the radar. So stay tuned for that 3-way shootout if that hasn't dropped already. But guys, I'm just not going to take you guys through its specs and talk about his tonality and talk about his technical performance, because that format sometimes gets boring for me. I'm not sure if it gets boring for you. So the way I'm going to do this review is I'm going to talk about the top 10 things, or the top 10 reasons why you should consider the FLIPEARS AURORA XXIV. So it's pronounced XXIV and not 25, and that's because, you know, I double checked with our friend at FLIPEARS, and he's an awesome guy. Guys, I do want to first start with number 1, which has to do with their behavior and their conduct and how they deal with customers. So the number 1 reason why you should consider buying the AURORA XXIV is the fact that I think these guys from the Philippines, from Manila, are some of the nicest guys I've worked with. So I do have to disclaim and say that I do a lot of my vacationing and travel in Southeast Asia. So I have a favorite city in Bangkok, but I go with my wife, lest you go get any other ideas. So I like visiting Bangkok with my wife because I love Thai food and I love Thai culture, and I just find people there very welcoming and hospitable and very tourist friendly. So I love going to Bangkok for that. Now, over time, I have diversified my travel portfolio, and I've traveled to Indonesia and the Philippines extensively, and Singapore, of course. So I have to say that I find Filipinos in general to be very hospitable, very kind. They speak English really well, so it does make life easier to get around and all that, right? So these gentlemen at FLIPEARS are some of the nicest people I've worked with. They are very reminiscent of Zach and Bevan of ZMF headphones. Of course, ZMF is a headphone manufacturer based out of the US, and these guys are IM manufacturers, and the similarities don't just end over there. They're also very pretty, as you can see. And ZMF headphones also tend to be very pretty and picturesque. So the number 1 reason why you should consider buying the FLIPEARS AURORA XXIV is the fact that these guys are amazing to work with. Aries, who I work with and who's the person behind the show, they're just phenomenal to work with. Super friendly, super amiable, super, customer service oriented, and he's always available on WhatsApp and just amazing to deal with. As a matter of fact, I'm going to leave the WhatsApp number of Aries in the description section of this video in case you want to reach out and speak to him. He's just amazing to talk to about the hobby in general. Okay, so that's number one. The number 2 reason for buying the FLIPEARS AURORA XXIV is that they are just stunning to look at. They are a sight to behold. And these sort of, the coloration here transitions, right? From green to blue to different shades in between. And they're supposed to remind you of the Northern Lights. And they do. And they look stunning. And they look different in different lighting conditions. So that's another reason to buy them, because I do think looks matter. I mean, a lot of you could be dissuaded or persuaded by looks. And a lot of you perhaps might be from the camp where looks don't matter. But for me, guys, like most human beings, I think looks will matter. And as a matter of fact, there are studies that show that how something looks affects your experience of it, whether the sound of it or whether the taste of it or what have you. So, looks matter, and these are beautiful. These are stunning to look at. They're extremely high quality in their, construction and all that. The third reason to buy these IMs is that they're supremely comfortable. Like, as you can see, that these are not exactly tiny. They have a bit of a volume, but they're not by any means as big as a lot of other IMs can be. They're not bulbous. They're not large. I would say they're somewhat sort of medium to medium sized. Just between medium and large. They fit. The ergonomics here are just top notch. And I'm not sure how they achieve that level of ergonomics. I think it comes down to the fact that these guys have been making custom monitors and universal monitors for musicians in the Philippines. And the Philippines does have a thriving musician industry, music industry. So these guys have been making these sorts of IEMs for 11 years. That is a long time to be in this hobby where you get new brands coming up every year. These guys, in that sense, are very experienced with the craftsmanship of IEMs, and that is also evident when you see the high-end stuff that they come out with, including the limited edition all gold, all silver IEMs that they've come out with. They have an all gold version of this. It's got diamonds in it, if I'm not mistaken, and they have an all silver version of the high-end IEM that's priced just below this, which is the FLIPEARS AURORA, and which I reviewed on this channel. So if you see how amazing the craftsmanship is in their golden and their silver limited edition releases, you'll understand why this works as well as it does in terms of its fit. The third reason for buying this is that you get a phenomenal stock cable. This stock cable opens up the sound of this IEM like very few can, and I've tried other expensive cables with this. Not only does this cable make for excellent synergy with this IEM, making sure that you don't have to spend extra money in getting an upgrade cable, you can even use this cable with other flagship IEMs you have with great results. So I have used this cable with the Fat Free Grand Maestro, with the AURORA Audio Jewel, with the Treble, and they've all worked really, really well. So this cable is a silver cable. It's a very premium looking, feeling, sounding silver cable, and that's a strong reason for buying this if you ask me. The number 4 reason for buying the AURORA XXIV is the fact that this is a wonderful IEM that's close to bass head levels without actually being bass head. And what that means to me is that you get a lot of bass impact because life is better with bass, as my friend Guy Lerner likes to say. And life is better with bass. This also has life is better with the balanced bass. This bass is balanced in that there's a bit of sub bass and mid bass with this bass. And it's very balanced, and it's a nice glide from sub bass to mid bass. It doesn't do the fault of just being very sub bass heavy, which is the most common tuning for bass, even with flagship IEM these days. Very few flagship IEMs will do mid bass right, so you have the exceptions among the likes of Xenon 6 from For Audio and Campfire Trifecta, and those IEMs do mid bass well. So this actually does mid bass and sub bass well, which leads to a certain warmth that flows through the mid range without ever clouding the mid-range. So the way they've tuned the bass upwards and then downwards, so it slopes down exactly the right level, is just the stuff of dreams, guys. The number 5 reason for buying this IEM is that this has great mids. This brand, FLIPEARS, and even if you ask them, like, they'll tell you that they go for mid-range clarity, mid-range nuance, mid-range organicness, mid-range lushness. So the beauty of the mid-range here is that it's warm, but it's not like Sennheiser HD650 warm. It's not cold like a lot of high feminine mid-ranges can be. It's warmer than it's cooler, but it's just right. It's lush. And at $3,000, you get mid-ranges that perhaps compare with this, but at $2,000, I can't think of a single mid-range that actually compares with this. Not the Symphonium IEMs, not, the Sony Z1R, and certainly not the 6-4 Audio, because 6-4 Audio mid-range to me sounds a bit soft in its transients. This is very, very not soft or tactile. It's just right. The mid-range transients really work for me. You get a lot of texture and nuances. You get separation between images. And the mid-range resolution is just standout for me, guys. So I really, really like this IEM for its mid-range. Moving on. The number 6 reason for buying this IEM is its treble presentation. Its treble presentation is actually very, very good because it's airy, it's present, but it never gets tizzy or splashy. So cymbals, for example, right, which is always a very good test of treble, cymbals sound present, but they don't sound overly sonorous. They don't sound like they splash for longer than they should. When people clap in a live concert kind of situation, it sounds great. It sounds real. It sounds lifelike. So live music sounds lifelike, which is a testimony to its air frequencies. And then again, notes sound sharp and incisive. The snap of a snare drum just comes through really, really nicely. And that's only possible if you have a certain amount of mid-treble. But you don't get that mid-treble spike like you even get with a masterful headphone like a high-frequency Susvara. You just get the right amount of mid-treble that keeps things interesting, distinct, textured, nuanced, and sharp when things are called to be sharp. So you want an electric guitar to have a tag, and that comes through with this. You want snare drums to have a snap, and that comes through with this. So that's another strong reason. The number 6 reason for buying this is the treble, guys. It's just so well tuned across the frequency spectrum. The number 7 reason for buying this is that it does have resolution in spades. It is one of the most resolving IMs under $3,000. This, I think, trades blows with the Fur Audio Xenon 6 for resolution. It's more resolving than the Campfire Trifecta. It's slightly more resolving than the $1,000 Symphonium Helios, which is an outlier for resolution, because the Helios, I think, is even more resolving than the Campfire Trifecta, although I prefer the Campfire Trifecta to the Helios because resolution is not everything, and that's why I'm ranking it, or talking about it as the number 7 parameter for which this is worth buying. It is very resolving, and by that I mean you will hear nuances, inflections in a singer's voice that you might not hear with other IMs. Like when Chris Cornell of Soundgarden, or I mean when he sings even his solo tracks, whether it is from whether it's Fell on Black Days, which is actually a Soundgarden track, by the way, or his Temple of the Dog tracks, right? I mean, you get this sort of wistfulness coming through his voice. You get a sense of his lips parting. You get the airiness of his vocals, and it's the sheer breathiness of his vocals. It just comes through. It's so nuanced. It's so resolute. You hear slight, crackles here and there inside the venue that you're supposed to hear. You hear like chairs moving, and it's just phenomenal. And little things that perhaps get missed with lesser IMs in the background of the performance are all captured really nicely. Like the whole cliche that you hear things that you might not have heard before is very applicable with this IM, guys. So that's number 7. Number 8, this has great macro dynamics and microdynamics. So you get a good sense of contrast. There are times when listening to a track, you'll feel like you need to turn the volume down because it gets loud when it's supposed to. And there are times when you feel like you need to turn the volume up because it gets soft. So the gradations or the delta between the loudest part of a passage and the softest or quietest part of a passage is pretty evident, is pretty amazing. So it's very dynamic. The number 9th reason I would suggest buying this is extraordinary timbre. It's just very coherent. It's well put together. It's got great timbre. Timbre is something that makes instruments sound lifelike, and it does sometimes, and more often than not, go beyond resolution and tonality and all that. It's often a function of the drivers being used. It's a function of the crossover. It's a function of the circuitry. It's a function of the craftsmanship of the IM manufacturer, and the timbre here is spot on. Timbre also comes through because of the coherence between the different driver types, so ensuring that they're firing in unison and you don't get some sort of a driver sort of, a dissonance that might come through with lesser IMs. It's all very coherent. It's all very cohesive, from drums to electric guitars to rhythm guitars to the piano. The piano just sounds so beautiful with this. It just captures the piano really well. And once you hear the piano here, you'll know that this is timely right. Okay, so that's the top 9 reasons for buying this IM. The number 10th reason I would like to suggest is that this scales with amplification. So that's a reason for me, because I like IMs that scale. So what happens is this sounds magnificent of the Sony W1ZM2, which is quite sufficient for driving this. But then once you pair the Sony with an amp, and in this case it's Aroma A100TB amp, which is a pretty amazing amp, which will get its own review. This scales, this opens up more, this slams a bit more, the bass becomes more tactile, and it's just amazing. So I've even driven this using sources like my Hyphaman DAC amps, the EF600, the EF500, the Hyphaman Serenade, and the bass punch becomes more voluminous, the sound stage becomes more voluminous, and it just becomes a more fun experience. It becomes a more joyful and more exciting ride. So I like being able to tweak the sound of my IM by using external amplification and by swapping sources. So that makes this very worthwhile and very rewarding for me. So these are the top 10 reasons why you should buy this, guys. And of course, if you want more specs on this, this has an 8-core silver-plated copper cable, which I've talked about. So this is a silver-plated copper cable. So that's worth keeping in mind. A 2-year extended warranty with this. You can get connectors, and it does come with connectors like the 3.5, 4.4, and 6.35 mm. I don't have those connectors with me, guys, but you can if you wanted to. It's, of course, a 10-driver tribrid. So you have 2 ESTs for the ultra highs, 6 BAs, and so among the 6, you have 2 for low mids, 2 for mid mids, and 2 for high mids. And then for bass, you have 2 what they call fire woofers. So these are powerful dynamic drivers that give a lot of bass. Guys, fantastic IM this, and I recommend it strongly. Do give this a shout. I mean, do give Aries a shout if you want to give this a whirl, if you want to try this and all that. And it's amazing. It's just an amazing IM. So that's it for me, Sajid Amit, signing out, and stay tuned for my next one. Do check out the link to the purchase website for this and the WhatsApp number of Aries in the description section of this video. Take care. Bye-bye.